Good morning, dear ones, and welcome to Unity Church. And a very special welcome to those of you who are visiting with us today. This is a good time to find a new church. This morning, we tune in from our singular rooms to join together in worship. Welcome to this time we set aside each week to help us find and keep our balance, to think about those things that matter most, and to align our lives to integrity, service, and joy. Here in the Ames Chapel, your worship leaders gather, learning as we lead, to offer clarity and comfort in these trying times. We know that nothing can replace the face-to-face, hand-in-hand voices joined in song, embodied worship that being in each other's company can bring. And we also know the ministry we share has never been about building. Following the service, we invite you to come together for an online coffee hour on Zoom to create strong connections. The link is on the homepage. In the coming days and weeks, we'll be finding new ways to come together for worship, for learning, for deep connection, for justice, and for love. Welcome, and stay tuned.
resilience has changed a lot in the last few weeks. I'm so amazed by the creativity with which we are collectively meeting this challenge. My social media is ablaze with art and writing and positive messages meant to lift the spirits. People are finding many ways to have this experience of isolation together in community, and it's all happened so fast. Although on a totally different scale, it reminds me of my 3 years on the board at Unity. There were several times when a challenge came up that needed an immediate response or action. Driven by shared values and a sense of moral obligation, the board and the executive team were able to work together to do what was needed. Creativity and nimbleness were essential for a timely and appropriate response. Although I'm no longer on the board, I recognize that same creativity and commitment to meeting the community's needs in recent responses by the board and the leaders of the church. The pivot to totally online church and the commitment of Rob and Jan to see us through this extraordinary time are such a testament to the resilience of this community. It inspires me to find the creativity within myself to find ways to bless the world with my own response. Come, let us worship together.
Good morning, friends. As we shelter in our places and stay at home, thank you for the many photos that I have seen of your kitchens, of parents and children baking cookies and cakes and gathering for virtual dinners with your extended friends and families. I'm thinking ahead to the coming weeks, and I imagine the same for sharing the Passover Seder, for Easter brunch, and maybe even for breaking the Ramadan fast, as all of us in the community find our way of staying at home. I think this bringing our spiritual practices home couldn't be more important than for a moment like this in our changing world. But I've been thinking about another kitchen, a kitchen near a train station in the Ginza district of Tokyo, Japan. A small kitchen of a restaurant, just a glass door away from a subway platform. Sukiyabashi Jiro is the name of the restaurant, and the kitchen is small, and the counter up front seats only 10 people at a time, and they serve only sushi. About 20 pieces of sushi, one sushi piece at a time, and the whole meal lasts just 15 to 20 minutes. The owner of this restaurant provides the best sushi in the world and was announced as a national treasure by the government of Japan. If you go to the restaurant, it may be difficult to find seating as thousands and thousands of people want to taste Jiro's sushi. His sushi was made internationally popular in a documentary film, Jiro Dreams of Sushi. His goal is actually as simple as it is difficult. He gets up every day and he does just one thing, making sushi better and better, day in and day out. He's been doing this for over 60 years, and if you ask the apprentice chefs in the restaurant, they will tell you that they are not allowed to even cut into a fish unless they know how to hold a fish properly and practice doing that for 10 years. Every morning, he wakes up and he goes to find fish, to go find rice. And it's interesting that his dedication to this practice has gathered a friendship, a community, like the rice dealer who sells quality sushi rice just to Jiro, because Jiro is the only one who knows how to use it the way it's supposed to be. And the same is for the fishmonger, who sources the best, freshest fish for Jiro. I'm thinking about an invisible thread that connects all of these people together. A thread that speaks about their love and dedication to their craft, to this practice. There's a Japanese word that describes these artisans and master practitioners. Shokunin. Shokunin are people who practice over and over again to develop their craft. But I think more importantly, shokunin are people who in their heart feel a moral obligation to bring their very best selves to better the whole world. And I'm thinking about shokunin nurses and doctors and epidemiologists. I'm thinking about shokunin teachers who make distance learning possible. I'm thinking about shokunin tech people who make live streaming for us possible. I'm thinking about shokunin neighbors who bring food, grocery to their neighbors in need. I'm thinking about bringing our spiritual practice home, because a church is not a building. A church is not even a group of people with a similar interest. A church is a community of religious practice. And that means lighting our chalices, singing our songs, praying our prayers, caring for our neighbors, with as much dedication to our practice as Jiro brings to his. Jiro dreams of sushi, and through dedicated practice, he has given the world a beautiful gift. You and I, we who dream of a much better world, may we, through our spiritual practice at home, make the world so. Amen.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Together we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and of every sacred community. We stand at the side of parents and teachers and all those whose primary spiritual practice is caring for children, with those who live with grief or chronic pain, with illnesses seen and unseen, with mental disability or addiction. We pray for our neighbors in prison, for those who care for family members in ill health, and those who struggle just to stay afloat in the midst of poverty. Our lives are blessed by those who knowingly and with curiosity and courage face their final days. and by those who rise above heartbreak to challenge oppression in all of its forms. We pray for those in harm's way, for the wisdom and strength of the leaders of the world, and for the people of this courageous congregation, as together we live into our longing to embody and help to build the beloved community. And will you pray with me for all these we now name? We mourn the death and celebrate the life of Steve Dalkey. Steve, who was an active participant in the life of the church in afterthoughts and in a number of other settings, had been experiencing increasing health challenges and died this past week. A Zoom service of remembrance will be held at 1 p.m. this coming Saturday after next, April 11th at 1 o'clock. You can find the link on the church's website. We are thrilled to welcome a new Redeemer into the world. Emily Jacqueline Foster Walters was born last Sunday night to parents Sarah and Nick. Grandparents Sally and Mark Foster have met Emily through the window and look forward eagerly to the day when they can take her into their arms. And it is a joy to share the news that Zoe Alexandra Brunquell was born in Seattle this past week to parents Will and Christina. Grandparents Sally Scoggin and Don Brunquell could not be more thrilled to welcome their first grandchild into the world. And we are deeply pleased and proud to report that former Hallman intern Arif Mamdani met yesterday with the Ministerial Fellowship Committee, and having survived the rigors of the process, was welcomed warmly into our ministry. Wonderful news for Unitarian Universalism, as well as for Arif and his family. May we stand in compassionate solidarity with our neighbors, here at home and all around the world. May they and may we be instruments of just and lasting peace. I now invite you to speak aloud or hold in the silent sanctuary of your hearts the names of those you'd like to lift today in worship. And will you pray with me? Holy One, source of radiance and reason, thou whose love endows and animates our lives, we acknowledge thy presence within and among and beyond us this day. Help us, we pray, to find our way back to the still point, to that place to which we travel, from which we summon the quality of attention we hope to bring to the people and the work that matters most. Help us to be grateful for the teachings which hold us to our highest aspirations, the teachings which remind us that there is a path to be followed, and that it goes within and among and beyond us. Strengthen us in our resolve to be disciples of those teachings, that we might be instruments of a larger love in the healing of this broken and exquisitely beautiful world. May it be so. And amen. Friends, In these confusing and troubled times, the financial obligations of the church continue. We are able to be generous with the world because of your generosity with this institution. Let me gently remind you of the promises you've made, lest in our fear and anticipation we fall away from our commitments. We are well aware that some of us have had reduced hours or actually lost our jobs. We want to know when that happens. We want to be able to help and to serve you. But please don't let fear for the future negate the promises you've made. And just as you have made promises to the church has made promises to the world. Today, we made a promise to Microgrants, an organization that provides $1,000 grants to people in the Twin Cities to help to prepare them for work or to help encourage them in an entrepreneurial effort. And so the larger portion of our offering today goes out the proverbial doors to serve beyond our walls. We'd like to give you a moment now to turn to the instructions on the website and make a contribution to the well-being of the church and of the world. If you'd like to set up a continuing contribution so that the complexity of making a contribution during the service is eased, there are instructions for doing that at the website on the homepage as well. Thank you. And friends, will you repeat after me the words for the dedication of the offering? To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love we call the beloved community.
Which is weaving a tapestry of love we call the beloved community.
We dedicate our lives and this our offering.
We dedicate our lives and this our offering.
Ahmed?
Good morning, friends. So this song, written by my friend Abby Martinez, has served as a source of comfort for many of us. We've sung it to close meetings. The choir sung it at the beginnings and ends of services, of rehearsals. And I've heard from friends that sing it as they're in the car or getting through their day. The song is called Resilience. We've sung it in worship before. The lyrics do say that we stand shoulder to shoulder, but do stay 6 feet apart. So it goes like this. Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we can. So let's all sing it together. Ready? And
Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again, say yes we can. Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again, say yes we can. Resilience.
Thank you.
A collage of voices drawn from past and present trustees of the church. This from Justin Cummins. When confronted with adversity in the form of failure, what helps you to avoid despair in that context? Resilience. It's what enables you to keep going. Resilience is about being able to work with what you have, including the failure, to adapt, learn, maintain flexibility in your mindset and your approach, and also involves leaning on others as they lean on you.
Sherry Spence writes, I know that I'm buoyed up by the concern I see evidenced by the people around me and the way in which Americans are coming together to help each other. I have such admiration and gratitude for healthcare workers, both in our country and in places like Italy and Spain and China, who risk their own safety to help those who are suffering.
From Kit Brady. I started going to Unity in 1990. It's always been a place I could go when I needed to recenter and find strength. I was co-chair on the pledge drive in September 2001 when 9/11 happened, and everything seemed to come to a halt, and we didn't know what would happen. I remember sitting in the pews the Sunday after 9/11, uncertain and scared. When we sang "This Is My Song," something changed in me, and I felt like I was not alone, and a part of a larger community. I still draw strength from that moment.
Dan Hilster was 9 going on 10 in 1963 when the fire occurred in the sanctuary. He writes, I remember a can-do, make-do attitude about the church. Through the eyes of a child, church life continued much as it had. And then after a year and a half of rebuilding, we were able to reclaim our building, which had been transformed with a light-filled sanctuary, the reredos and skylight, the choir loft, and the Noack tracker organ, while retaining the white pine beams and oak pews. I'm comfortable in the knowledge that Unity Church-Unitarian has great resilience and will remain a place of vitality, reflection, action, teaching, and learning.
From Hal Freshley. The question of resilience is rather complicated. 1, there is resilience as a method of dealing with change. And 2, there is resilience in promoting change in an otherwise static milieu. I think of the latter when I think of unity. The zeitgeist of the Unity community is to persevere, e.g. toward building beloved community, against every setback, every barrier. This is a kind of resilience against the status quo that is both quixotic and dogged. Aspirational resilience?
Laura Park writes, when I reflect back on how we handled the controversy surrounding the courtyard during the remodel, I saw great resilience. There was a fundamental trust in leadership. There was a deep willingness to listen and to speak. There was love for the people who were hurting even when we disagreed about the right outcome. We stayed at the table. We moved through together as much as possible. I don't know that everyone would agree with my perspective. The victors write the history, after all. But it's the kind of issue that can break congregations apart, and this didn't.
From Lisa Brasso. I was on the board when Roy Phillips was asked to resign. I learned a lot about resilience on the part of a long-standing organization from that experience. Everyone was worried that somehow Unity would not survive not having a minister for so long. But we did, and very well. Everyone pitched in. Unity has a lot of tradition and commitment and ongoing practices that ensure we'll keep going.
Lee Carey remembers that it took great resilience to survive the departure of Roy Phillips as well as we did. That's resilience, a sturdiness and strength of character that gave us the ability to see that we were greater than anything that was happening, than anything that would happen. I was in awe when I saw the good that came out of such turmoil. How could that be? I could only think that it was the foundational strength of this church that gave us the bedrock we needed to put one foot in front of the other. Surely this strength came from the people whose faces I would see in church, but the real strength was from the people I've never met. The forebearers who sustained this church through equally difficult times. Their spirits fill this space, and their legacy reminds us that we're here to do good in the world, that this church makes a difference. It was and is the source of our remarkable resilience. What a wonderful gift.
From Ken Green. We are now undergoing a new period of transition. And how, we can't help but wonder, can Unity Church go on? And yet I am completely confident not only that we can and will go on, but that we will emerge on the other side of all this change, stronger and more vibrant yet. We have shown this again and again. We are, after all, a large and diverse congregation with a shared mission to truth, to what's real and genuine, to beauty and grace. We'll thrive.
Stuart Alger remembers that on a hot July day almost 20 years ago, a fire destroyed the inside of their house. In the days and weeks that followed, I remember feeling I was coming to the end of my rope, like I was stretched thin and beginning to fray. Unity rallied around us in a way that still moves me. Church members showed up at our burnt home on a Saturday and became part of the human line and wash crew that cleared the house of destroyed things and cleaned and stored what was salvageable. Unity Church embraced us in countless ways that allowed us to get through that fire, and I would say the church gave us a gift of resilience.
From Debbie Sheets. I was the chair of the board when Gretchen Thompson resigned and Roy Phillips left the congregation soon after. Resilience isn't something that just happens. It's something we make happen by the choices we make and how we work together. Resilience is both a spiritual practice and a way to live out our personal ministry in the world. My life has been hugely impacted by my time at Unity in that period, and I am a more resilient person because of my involvement at Unity.
Our present board chair, Jackie Smith, writes, "One of my practices of resilience is to forge ahead. That can be effective, but can also leave important things by the wayside. I'm hoping to cultivate some slower, more mindful practices in the coming weeks. My tendency to gratitude and the Unity community's cultivation of that value is important. I don't always outwardly say things could be worse, but I do say, wow, this is what's great. What is great in my life? My kids are healthy, my colleagues are competent, I have a warm home, I have my basic and higher needs met. In every challenge I've faced, I've found helpers. Being in a community that lets me say those things and then say, and this is hard, strengthens my resilience. It helps me ask for help. It helps me come to church and cry if I need to. I might look like I have it together, but the ability to be vulnerable is what Unity gives me as I show resilience."
Pauline Eichten writes, I was part of the 9-member Portland Avenue Property Task Force charged by the Board of Trustees in August 2003 to assess the options for the building, a rental property owned by the church. The task force presented a report in November 2003 to the board and the ET, executive team, with an analysis of the options explored. The cost of fixing the building and the potential liability of leasing the building to another entity to run as rental property posed significant challenges. Ultimately, church leadership decided to demolish the building. There was strong negative reaction from neighbors. A meeting was held in which concerns were heard and church leadership shared its rationales. I believe it was the start of Unity learning how to be a better neighbor and to be more aware of the church's role in the neighborhood.
Denny Miller writes, "We joined Unity when Arthur Foote was a leader of the Minnesota Unitarians and others in a crusade to better the lives of mentally impaired individuals. Arthur's humanism was followed by Roy Phillips, who turned us toward spirituality. He would start many services by saying, 'The place where we meet to seek the highest is holy ground.' Jan and Rob turned us outward toward the beloved community. I served on the board of trustees for 5 years, just as we established policy-based governance. All of these transitions made our congregation stronger in our individual and our public outlook. I eagerly look forward to new and expanded possibilities."
Finally, from Mark Walker. Qualities that foster resilience. Patience, born of the understanding that loss deserves its own respect, and that change will bring us to a new equilibrium. And the acceptance of impermanence, which guides us to letting go of how things have been, how we think things ought to be, and the very notion that we know best or that the past is best. What if better is yet to come in ways we have yet to imagine?
Conveniently enough, our theme this month has been resilience. Surely we need it now, as we have always needed, the ability to bounce back, the sense of center and groundedness from which we go out into the world. For the last few years, some of us at the center of the leadership of the church have been quietly talking about the concept of discipleship. Now we're careful with the word because it's one of those words to which religious liberals react. Like, you're supposed to lead, I'm supposed to lead, and you're supposed to follow, and that's the way it is. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is what are the core teachings of the church, and what does it mean to embody those teachings, to make them central to our lives and to the ministry we share in the world. When people join the church now, we tell them that there are 3 core expectations, which really in many ways are the core teachings of Unity Church. And they are to develop a personal spiritual practice to help you find and keep your balance, to engage one another in increasing depth of intimacy, of vulnerability, of honesty, and then when hearts break open and compassion rises, to organize the compassion to bless the world. So I want to begin by talking about the beginning of my own devotional practice, my own personal practice. My girlfriend ran away with my best friend, is what happened, and I was furious, just furious. And a friend of mine said, it's no fun being around you when you're furious. Why don't you find some way to come back to center so that you can be a good friend again? And he brought me to a martial arts class. And at first, the work really hurt. Physically, it hurt. And the pain reminded me that I needed to stay with it. So what began as a way to quell anxiety and rage evolved over many years of practice into something quite different. I remember when our older children were very young, a friend came down to visit us in Southern California and noticed that I was engaging in my daily devotional practice at whatever time of day I thought I needed it most. So if there was going to be a board meeting, I would wait until an hour before the board meeting, and then I would go do my practice, and then I would arrive at the board meeting fully aware and awake and intense. And he said to me, he said, how do you know what the most important moment of your day is going to be? Why don't you do this first thing in the morning? And ever since that time, aware of the degree to which surprises do come into our lives, as we have learned most recently, I've engaged in daily morning practice, hoping to summon that quality of attention that we want to bring to the people and the work we care about most. What began as an attempt to quell anxiety and manage my rage evolved over the years as I found myself becoming a little less reactive, a little more kind, as I found myself noticing the beauty that surrounds us, the feast laid out before us, as practice brought me new eyes and new ears and an opening heart. Bailey, how has practice taken root in your life?
Well, I will say that I've been thinking about developing a spiritual practice for much longer than I have actually been developing a spiritual practice, but I have gotten more serious about my at-home yoga practice in the last few months. Kind of starting in January, I did 30 days of yoga with a YouTube teacher that really helped me kind of make it a habit in my life. And
Talk about it.
okay. So now I try to do yoga every day, and I don't do it at the same time every day. And I actually do kind of follow what you said that you did initially in your practice, where I kind of do it as it fits into my life. And when I feel like my body needs it or my mind is a little bit afraid and I need it, which maybe I should rethink a little bit. So this is probably a good at-home time to do that. Another part of my spiritual practice that I didn't really think of as a spiritual practice before, but now I think is important, is that I read before falling asleep every night. And it's a way to kind of quiet my mind and prepare myself for sleep, and I think it has spiritual benefits that I maybe didn't realize for most of my life, but I've been doing it for a long time.
It's wonderful. It occurs to me that that what happens to me immediately after I complete my morning devotionals is very much like that old fairy tale in which either a blessing or a spell is cast that says, the first person you see upon waking, you will fall in love with. It's not always something you want to fall in love with, but so what? At some level, we're always wanting to connect. to connect beyond that sense of stillness at the heart of things, to re-engage. And at some level, that means there is a mysterious circuitry at work among us. Practice makes deep intimacy possible. And so, that quality of kindness, that reduced reactivity, makes room for greater intimacy, makes room for us to summon the courage to be more vulnerable. It helps us cultivate that quality of attention that helps us to notice and then eventually to come to know other people at ever greater depth. As we often say here, we work to become capable of going deep quickly with strangers. Just like practice transformed anxiety into kindness, intimacy, which is in a sense interpersonal practice, leads through friendship into a heartfelt aspiration to bless and be blessed by the world.
I got a call from a friend about 2 weeks ago, kind of as this whole situation was breaking open. She lives in upstate New York, so I think it happened a little bit earlier for her. But she called and she left me a message saying, this situation is making me really realize that I want to be more connected with the people that are really important to me, my good friends. And I just want to let you know that you'll be hearing from me more often from now on. And that made me really reflect on my relationships and all the people that I care about that I don't communicate with as often as I should. And so I've been making a concerted effort to reach out to people. And I think when I think about my spiritual practice, I'm thinking about incorporating a practice of having a list of people that I want to be talking to regularly and sending messages of love to regularly. And I think that is starting to come out of the spiritual practices that I'm developing.
My experience is that having made a serious commitment to personal practice and having grown some in my capacity to be vulnerable and to connect to other people well and to be less reactive and kinder, there has been an opening or a change of quality in my commitments to justice. What once was fierce and ideological in many ways has really become a kind of intimate justice, a sense of personal connection to people I don't even know all around the world. The other day, Jen and I were in conversation about what it will mean when the pandemic takes root in places where there is little or no health care available. What will that mean? And to add to our sense of concern and sometimes even desperation around the inadequacies of federal leadership and the lack of resources that we're seeing play out so tragically now in New York and other places around the country, to go beyond that into a sense of connection with the poorest people in the world, who are often also the most joyful people in the world. That's another sermon. Is also a fruit of spiritual practice. It's also a way to recognize that my life is framed by these core teachings that make it possible for me to be as joyful and as effective and as both serious and playful as a human being as I can possibly be. And so, friends, we commend this life to you. This is the discipleship we're inviting you into. This growing sense that runs from personal practice to depth of intimacy, to organized compassion that makes a difference in the world and in our lives. May it be so. And amen. And we end with these words from our beloved predecessor, Arthur Foote. May peace dwell in our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our wills and the love of truth forever guide us. May it be so, friends, and amen.